for the pledge.
Mrs. Sloan, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Bear, Mr. Greenstein, Mrs. Nadolny, Mrs. Weisberg. Thank you.
I'll make a motion for the adoption of the agenda, April 7, 2016. Do I have a second? Yes. Mrs. Johnson, all in favor? 6-0, thank you. We will now move to student and community comments. We will be keeping to the 3-minute limit, and we ask that you identify yourself for the record. Do we have any comments this evening? No. Okay. Well, I wasn't ready with my statement. I'm going to wait until we move to the budget discussion for my statement. So I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mrs. Sloan. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I really just, our primary discussion tonight is regarding the budget, but just a few other things that have been happening. We did complete the ELA state testing in grades 3 through 8. I know many people would like to know what our opt-out percentage was. We had about 30% of our students opting out, which means 70% of our students took the tests. There are some really wonderful district activities that took place this past month. I'd just like to mention a couple of them. If you weren't able to, you missed a phenomenal performance at the Tillis Center with our district band spectacular. We had 375 of our band students perform, and it was really, really a very special event. I want to thank Hartz and Mr. Scully and our music staff and so many people who worked to make that happen. Just last week, our district faculty had art exhibits and a musical performance. This was the work of our staff. Again, such great talent and inspiration. I was approached by many parents after who said that they loved it, that their children felt very inspired by seeing the passion and love that their teachers have for their disciplines. So it was really another very wonderful event. I know some people aren't always thrilled with these designations of months, but March is Women's History Month, and it was a great month for some very special women in our district. On March 13th, the Basketball Coaches Association of New York inducted our own athletic director, Stephanie Joannin, into their Hall of Fame. I know she doesn't want to be acknowledged, but we are very, very proud of Stephanie for this accomplishment. On March 16th, the North Hempstead 23rd Annual May W. Newberger Women's Roll of Honor in celebration of Women's History Month also inducted our Board of Education President, Karen Sloan. Wonderful honor. Well deserved. And just this past Friday, there is an association, the Long Island Scholarship Gala, or the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. Our CSEA union president, Richard Acevedo, is also the president of that association, and one of their honorees was Christine Vasilev for her work with the ENL population and her work as the president of the Teachers Association. That was also really a very wonderful event. Some very wonderful students in Nassau County were the recipients of those scholarship funds. So congratulations to Christine for that honor as well. Our students have They always perform well. We've had Intel semifinalists. We have two of them, Madeline Fagan and Emma Feldman. We've had LISUF awards. We've had our Weber Middle School Science Olympiad, won 26 medals. Great for them. Our science, we had arts, we had our NISMA students, we had all county art. We've been designated, or we were honored for dedication to music education, the district. And we've been enrolled in the Grammy Foundation as a Grammy signature school. So we have a lot of really, really positive events. If you haven't seen it, our most recent edition of Port Washington Pride, it highlights the incredible contributions of so many organizations and our HSAs and PTAs to the activities that really provide such tremendous enrichment to all of our students. And I really encourage you to read through this and see the fantastic things that happen for all of our students in our schools. So I have some comments also on the budget, but I will also reserve them for when we get to that discussion. I would just like to ask Ms. Fennick to give us a brief enrollment report before we move on.
Thank you, Dr. Mooney. As of March 23rd, 2016, we had 5,449 students, a difference of 108 from the same time last year, 108 more. And April 7th, as of today, our kindergarten enrollment is up to 347. We are projected at 420. So we are moving along. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a motion for the approval of the minutes for March 8th, 2016. Do I have a second? Mrs. Johnson, all in favor? 6-0. Thank you. We're going to move to our discussion item for the budget. Mrs. Callahan, do you want to start with that?
Certainly. This is a slide that I try to present to the community each year. It simply is a comparison based on the most recently available documentation from Nassau BOCES. In all my years here in Port Washington, we have always been either number 10, 11, or 12 of the school districts in the surrounding North Shore area. It's just to give you a general idea of what the cost per pupil is. This can fluctuate from year to year, obviously, depending upon whether your enrollment is going up or down, whether you have had larger increases in budget because you've increased staffing or because you have had capital expenditures or debt service that will add to your cost per pupil. So in 2014-15, Port Washington is number 11 of the North Shore districts. The next slide is something from several years ago. It's also the per pupil expense. I went back to the 2012-13 North Shore districts because I came across a report from the U.S. Department of Education that was published in January that showed various areas of the country. I put this slide up because I thought it was very interesting. If you look simply at the asterisk districts at the lower end of the page, suburban New York State, New York City, and Newark, New Jersey. Port Washington is just above Newark, New Jersey, and it's just interesting from my personal perspective working with numbers to see what the cost of educating a child in the northeast of the United States would be. I am going to turn this portion over to Dr. Mooney to discuss staffing, and then I will come back to you and talk to you about where we began our process and where we are as of this evening. Dr. Mooney?
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. If you're able to take a look at the far right column of the staffing proposal, what you see on the left side is what the district administration originally proposed at the beginning of the budget process. And yesterday, if you were able to attend the budget meeting, administration did provide to the board a budget that is within the levy limit, but also includes a good portion, also included, I should say, a good portion of the staffing. And we did discuss how that was accomplished, because we did reduce increases in other codes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Based on feedback from yesterday's meeting, administration took some time again to see if there were any ways to include more of the staffing. And so in consultation with principals and directors, we took a closer look, and we went back to some codes and reduced in some other codes. And so what you see before you in the column as of 4/7, which is tonight, we are requesting the 5 elementary sections, 4 of which need to be funded. One of the sections is a result of reducing the PEP teachers from 3 teachers to 2 teachers. The 3 ESL teachers that are mandated, one will be at the elementary level, 1 at Weber, and 1 at Schreiber. We must have a position in place for the possibility of a bilingual kindergarten class. We are not 100% certain that we will require that position, but we must have plans for that position. In the yesterday's discussion, there was not a guidance counselor position for Schreiber High School. This is one of the positions where we took another look. We reduced from some other codes, thanks to both Dr. Westervelt and the high school, Mr. Pernick and Mr. Hardy. That collaborative effort resulted in the dollars to fund another guidance counselor for Schreiber. Excuse me. In some discussions with Ms. Frizel, our Executive Director of Pupil Personnel, the original request was another 0.2 in special education for Schreiber. It seems as the numbers are falling out, that will not be necessary. Should it be necessary, Ms. Frizel will look to her special education grant to provide the funding for that. In speaking with Ms. Frizel and Mrs. Giebel, we looked at the 0.2 speech at Guggenheim, and we believe that with the existing staff and some readjustment of caseloads, that we can cover that need with existing staff. The elementary reading request, we did reduce it from a half-time to a 0.3. We have found that 0.3 reading is very effective. We've had it in other schools at other times. Manor Haven has had it this year. So this seems like a very reasonable recommendation. We have retained the full-time math resource, and that person will be divided between Guggenheim and Manor Haven based on conversations and a recommendation from Stephanie Joannin, our athletic and phys ed director. She feels that we can reduce the 0.7 to a 0.4. The way that we are funding these partial positions is that we went back and we looked at some areas where we had added support staff to alleviate or help with the oversubscribed classes. Since we have now made provision in this budget to break those classes into additional sections, that support staff is no longer needed, so we reallocated the funds for that to provide for this other support. When I say that, I mean EAs and teacher assistants. We had said yesterday we would have the business position. That remains. The 4 security aides are still in the budget, and so we probably can cover the bilingual teacher assistant, and we are recommending to the board that should one of the sections or the ENL position not be filled, that we use part of that money for the supervisor of operations position, perhaps as a hire in January or a half a year. So this is pretty much overall. Again, this pretty much covers all of the staffing recommendations that we had originally put forward. I will remind everyone that it's not as though we did reduce increases in other codes in the budget, so it's not as though we came up with more money to fund these positions. So I will turn it back to Ms. Callahan to kind of give you more detail about some of that.
Thank you, Dr. Mooney. Picking up with Dr. Mooney's last statement, certainly there was a change that took place, number one, when the state finally did give us their budget, which for the first time in all my years of doing budgeting turned out to be a significant amount of money. I do come from the cynical point of view because I was around doing this job in a year when the state education department, not the state education department, the state of New York, in the middle of the year came back to school districts and told them that they had to give back aid in the amount of millions and millions of dollars, which caused school districts to have to cut programs back in 1990. So when we were hearing that there was the potential for the gap elimination aid to be totally eliminated, it's my responsibility to be conservative, to look out for the long-term interest of the district. So up until we had something in writing showing us the exact number that we were getting, we had been working with their projections that were published in January, which were significantly lower. In addition to that, once the Board of Education realized there was an opportunity with additional state aid to review all the specific staffing, we tried to develop a plan which helps us to bring forth these staffing recommendations, but quite honestly, at a cost at the building levels in particular, because almost every dollar that principals requested in equipment, supplies, furniture, copier paper increases were all cut back to their current spending level in order for us to find $400,000 in savings to match the additional $400,000 in additional state aid and the board contribution of another $400,000 to make up what you may remember from our February discussion of $1.2 million in staffing. So that's the overarching way that we moved forward very quickly in the last 36 hours. So you will see on here how we began the process back in early March and presented a draft budget to the board. It did not allow for any staffing because it had put in the supplies and equipment that had been requested on the building level, textbooks, and so on. April 1st, we got information on additional state aid. The board considered possibly applying additional fund balance on the revenue side of this budget. There was a small change in the levy limit based on part of the formula that we're required to follow. When you get more state aid for building aid, then it's a deduction from what you're allowed to levy to the taxpayer. So that's why the levy limit went down from 0.85 to 0.80. Then yesterday at the Budget and Facilities meeting, we talked about specific positions that that had the greatest priority from the superintendent and the administration's point of view, which are clearly listed here and have been delineated by the superintendent. That brought our budget increase up to 1.19. The only way we were able to add those positions were to go back to the building principals to look at their supplies, equipment, and so on. And the total reductions yesterday in the budget were $330,000. The increase in the budget was about $960,000, but the aid and the fund balance helped to balance that out, revenue versus appropriation. And then this morning there was additional talk in order to fund those part-time positions Dr. Mooney mentioned to you, the reading, the math resource and so on, and the full-time guidance position. And those were full offsets from existing items that were in the budget, the support staffing and textbook monies and supply monies at the high school. And so where we are at this moment is 1.19% budget increase with a 0.080% levy increase, which is within the levy limit for the school district. The only thing that we have not been able to fund at this point is an after-school program that has been in existence for the last 4 years. That was a grant-funded program, which costs approximately $280,000 a year. What I list at the very bottom of the page is if we had a budget which included all of the supplies, all of the equipment, if nothing had been cut out, if it included all the staffing, which was the original hope, and if it had included the ESL star, it would be over $1 million more. It would far exceed the levy limit. The levy would be 1.94% instead of the 0.80, and the budget increase would be 1.93. So I open this to the board for discussion to answer any questions. Dr. Mooney?
I'm sorry,
Oh, and there was one other thing.
I did want to add that we have a plan for an after-school support for ESL students, in addition to all of our students with homework clubs, and we are looking to use a portion of any possible sections that are not filled, a portion of those dollars to fund that, and we can do that. We feel we can do a very good program at the home schools to support really all of our students with homework clubs, and certainly for the ENL children in particular. So I failed to mention that before. So.
And I did want to add, not on a financial level, at least at the moment, but to remind everyone that there will be a second proposition on May 17th. There is a parcel of land, a 5-acre parcel of land that the district owns in Sands Point, which is right near the Helen Keller Center. And We think that this sale of land, if authorized by the community, could be profitable and would therefore shore up our revenues and allow us to help going forward to reduce the tax levy each year for the next 10 years or so, if the decision is to pay that back to the community over a given period of time or over a shorter period of time, but 10 years is the maximum that any profits on that sale would be returned to the taxpayers. So I would just ask everyone who is coming out to vote to keep that in mind, that in addition to the budget itself and to the board member elections, there will be a second proposition on the sale of land. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say, to start us off on this conversation, that since the announcement from the state on our aid Friday, we really have done quite a lot of work, and the administration has been hard at work, along with a lot of the administrators in the building level and staff, to get this all done for tonight. And we've had a lot of community discussion since, I guess, February, talking about whether or not to pierce the tax cap and putting forth to the community our needs in staffing to keep our district not only where we are now without making cuts, but actually to bring us back to where we think we need to be from cuts we've made in the past few years. And nothing has changed. We think that those things are mandatory. What changed is some of the funding we received, and looking at all these numbers and looking at all the staffing and reworking and seeing that ultimately we were able to pretty much get where we wanted to go with that staffing, with the additional aid, and with an additional $400,000 from our reserves. When we began the discussion, it was very clear that we didn't want to take any more money from the reserves, that we can't keep doing that and stay as fiscally healthy as we need to be. But when it came down to $400,000 being the deciding factor to be able to do what we need to do, or to ask the community to pierce the tax cap, it seemed to a lot of us that perhaps we should be revisiting the idea of taking the $400,000 from reserves. And so the question before the board tonight is whether or not we want to go forward with that plan, with getting the staffing that we need, and making some cuts to some codes in increases, but things that our superintendent and administration have stood behind as being acceptable and workable, and not ask the community to pierce the cap, or not take any money from the reserves and go back to discussing piercing the cap. So along with any other questions, that's really the big one before us tonight. So does anybody want to start us out? Chris?
Again, thank you for all the work in the last few days and the past couple months. Can you just reiterate what the changes are with the state rebate for this next year? Like the rebate check that some of us got, and how it's going to change for the next session?
The way the law has changed, there would be a maximum $130 rebate, and it would not even be a rebate check. It would be, excuse me, a separate rebate check. It would be applied against your income tax return, so it wouldn't even be recognized as being associated with school district taxes, but the maximum would be $130. This year, it was, for some people, a larger amount because it included a payment because our district participated in what the state referred to as a tax freeze, plus it included 2 years' worth of tax increase allocations. But next year's will be down to $130, and household income has to be under $275,000 to be eligible.
And I know that yesterday you had mentioned the increase in transportation aid, and you were trying to verify if that was truly the case, if it was, because it seemed like a large increase in transportation. One, were you able to verify that that was where it was supposed to be? And two, does that allow us to take money out of our own code of transportation and move it to somewhere else? Or is that increase in transportation aid not, like, does the transportation aid that we were given offset anywhere else to where we could put the increase somewhere else?
That's considered a revenue, a general pot of revenue. So no, we've already counted it as a revenue to offset the total budget. It's not simply applied against transportation. When the state creates their allocations in their convoluted way, I have not been able to verify why we have a $200,000 increase in that particular aid, to answer the other half of your question.
So, I do truly appreciate the administrators, our building principals, and everybody going back to the drawing board several times and literally scraping more money from different codes. And I appreciate that you were able to get as much staff in there. One thing I don't appreciate is people rallying people based on their own numbers that they pick out of the air and assume that we're going to have more retirements or we should be getting more back from this place or that place. And I certainly don't appreciate threats to vote against things just based on your own information. I also cannot, at this moment, in good conscience, pull out more money from the reserves. So at this point, unless you can convince me otherwise, I can't support the budget.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work that everybody's put into it, but I'm somewhat frustrated by the process. We tried to be really open and and started this a long time ago, and then still everything just gets totally turned upside down in the last 36 hours, giving us very little time to review, very little time to ask questions, very little time to understand what's really going on, and I don't think that's the way we should be doing it. Mrs. Callahan, when you gave us the first budget run, when we were talking about, based upon the January figures of revenue from the state, what was the difference between the revenue from the state that you plugged in then and the revenue from the state that you plugged in on April 1st?
The total difference was approximately $400,000. At the same time we received that additional aid, you have heard me talk about an issue with LIPA and pilots, and that we are in negotiations countywide with LIPA, and they are, as part of that negotiation, saying that the money that we had already put into our budget as a pilot revenue was going to be reduced. So as of yesterday, when we met, the net difference in our overall revenues from January to yesterday was an increase of $269,000.
It's funny because that's what my adding machine said too when I went through the numbers, and I don't understand how we're talking about an extra $1.7 million of revenue when it's a $240,000 difference between it. But now all of a sudden everything's changed because we have $240,000, which we call 1.7 million. So I'm confused about that.
Well, I don't know that anybody in the administration has said the difference was $1.1 million from January to now. I think that it is $1.1 million from last year to this year, but since we began this process, I have been asked for levy limit calculations, and I do need some number from the state of New York to do that. And as numbers change, I adjust those estimates for you. So I was working with a number that was approximately $500,000 lower than what happened on April 1st.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry because I didn't mean to imply that you were doing this at all. I totally trust your numbers, and that's why I came up with the same $240,000 that you did. This is definitely not on you. This is on us as a board, not on you. You answered Chris's question about the transportation aid. Is the BOCES aid the same thing that just goes into the pot, or is that something that we have to give to BOCES?
All aids, all revenues are just considered in one big pot. All expenditures are in one big pot. The same as we receive aid because we spend money on textbooks, but we don't apply that aid and say, we'll reduce the cost of the textbook line. We can't net out. Everything has to be grossed.
But if we didn't buy any textbooks, we wouldn't get any textbook aid.
That's correct. That's why it's called expenditure-driven aid.
So if we didn't spend money on BOCES, we wouldn't get BOCES aid.
Correct.
All right. One thing I noticed is that the special education teachers line is going down to levels from lower than they were 2 years ago, and I'm wondering if that's a change in the FTEs, or if that's just because retirements and we have people working at lower levels in that. Is there any explanation for that? And if you don't know this off the top of your head, I totally understand.
We did have 2 special education teachers put in for, they were 2 of the 4 were special education teachers in the retirements.
So our FTEs are the same.
Yes.
And Larry, what I generally do during the budget process is put the replacement money either in, it's in 2110-120, which is elementary, or 2110-130. I don't go to the counselor's line, the special ed, the psychologist. I would rather just keep it concise in one pile so that then I can redistribute it once we know where we're going.
Again, understood. It was just a large drop in that one line, and that's a line that I always look at, so I looked at it. What is our fund balance as of the beginning of this year, our undesignated reserves?
At the beginning of this year, it was $4.7 million.
Okay, and what it would be anticipated if we give the $950,000 into to offset the budget next year?
It was 850.
Sorry,
Yeah. We would, based on my estimates, we would be at $4.1 million.
And so that would keep us on the controller's list of susceptible to fiscal distress?
I would imagine we would be. It would not show a dramatic drop, but because our budget is also going up, we're going in the wrong direction.
We would probably, instead of being the 3rd lowest reserve per student, maybe we'd be number 1?
That I can't say, but yes, I remember that statement.
It's good to be number 1 in something. Would our reduced fund balance impact the way the rating agencies charge us interest on our bond notes?
Actually, it's very contrary, because at the same time, the controller's office came out and said we were fiscally stressed. Moody's did restate our position, and they said we were especially strong.
But if our fund balances go down another $400,000 or so, would they still say that, or would they review us again before we issued our next set of bonds?
They would probably, they will review us again. We will not be going out for our bond for a portion of our bond for probably 2 years at least. We will take bond anticipation notes for 2 years before that happens. So there's still time to move in the proper direction.
You said that if we sell any land, that money has to come back to the taxpayers. Does that mean we cannot use it to put in our reserves?
It would be put in a separate reserve. It would be counted as our reserve. So it would, in terms of the finances, show an improvement in our reserves. The requirement under the law is that any real property sale, the benefit of that must go back to the community over no more than a 10-year period. So depending on the amount of money and the wishes of the board relative to the return to the taxpayer, it could drain down slowly, or it could come out all at once.
Okay, but basically operationally, it's not a reserve, it's just sort of a reserve on paper.
Right, it's a restricted reserve.
Okay. I guess, one of the other things that sort of concerns me about this budget is that we're restoring cuts that we've made to try to stay where we are, and we're giving up the opportunity to potentially actually grow and move forward. And to me, that is somewhat depressing. I think that's been our mode for the last decade since I've been on the board. We've been trying to not fall too far behind, and that's very different than having a positive vision and pushing forward and bulking up programs and providing more things for more children so that they can be more successful. But that's just my own personal opinion. I guess I have a question for Dr. Mooney, and then I will make a comment after that. But I know that Dr. Mooney understands every little nook and cranny of the district and has like this wealth of knowledge that none of us could ever hope to match. And I know that she's very quiet about what goes on in the district sometimes, which is somewhat frustrating as a board member sometimes, because it's nice to hear some of this stuff, and we get to hear some of it at the curriculum meeting. And I know we've been going for a long time about enrichment and equity and trying to reach out to everybody. And I was just wondering if Dr. Mooney could give us a little thing about how we are bringing enrichment and how we're trying to meet the needs of all of our students who are different types of learners, and trying to give them to go beyond what we're required to do, but really try to make school more of a place that they want to be rather than a place that they have to be.
First of all, I just want to make a comment about where we were when I took over as a superintendent and where we are now as a school district. And I believe that we have been working steadily to build program, to strengthen our teaching force with some very significant and impressive professional development. We have worked through a variety of goals. We have addressed many different program initiatives. The board has requested this administration to consider and review numerous programs, all of which we have done at the request of the board. We have been asked to put forward a consistent math curriculum, which we have done, and we have supported our teachers through for the last 2 years. We have brought in new social studies. We have brought in increased literacy. We are working through science. We have done so many things. Our cultural arts program is exploding. We don't have enough room on our stages for the number of students who participate in both the musicals and the music areas. The arts, our students' talent speaks for itself, and what our teachers produce with our students in all of those areas. We have fantastic student athletes. This district has a very comprehensive, extensive program for all its students. In the last few years, the budgets that the board has approved, or I should say adopted, and the community has approved, have really contributed to our ability to move ourselves forward, despite the fact that we are one of the few districts that has an increased student enrollment, increased student needs, shortage of classroom space, and a whole host of variety of other things that you might think would deter us, and yet they don't. Because we work very, very hard to, again, propel ourselves and move ourselves forward. And so there are many things that occur in the schools that are not simply the delivery of a basic education to our students. There are numerous assemblies and programs that are either funded through district funds, through HSA funds, through cultural studies, arts funds, either Hearts or the Ed Foundation. So many different places bring in so many different opportunities for our kids, whether they involve dancing classrooms. We have Residents for a More Beautiful Port Washington that helps us support our students in learning about the environment. I mean, the list can really go on, which is one of the reasons why we took the time to dedicate the last issue of Port Washington Pride to this very topic, because enrichment is not just for a specific group of children. Enrichment is what we do every day, and I would welcome any board member to come and visit our schools and see the incredible things that are going on, the enthusiasm that takes place with our students, the manner in which our principals and our staff are utilizing technology in incredible ways. And many of you have seen a lot of this come through the curriculum committee. There have been numerous presentations in a variety of areas that really demonstrate what a fantastic education the children in this community receive. And the budget that we are proposing tonight is to continue to do exactly that. I do understand the reservations about taking some additional money from reserves, but from my vantage point, it's a much smaller amount than we have done in the past, and the fact that we have been able to put in the staffing that not only keeps us stable, but does allow us to move forward. I think it became pretty clear. With larger class sizes, it is far more difficult to differentiate instruction. That is one of the reasons why putting in the sections is one of the top priorities of this budget. So I don't really know how to accomplish or move forward further and stay within the levy limit, which is, I believe, at this time, the fiscally responsible recommendation for the superintendent to make to the Board of Education. So I will have to take my direction from the board on that point. But I do speak of a variety of events. Many of the events and things that occur are well attended by our parents in the schools. I love the children of the school district. I don't really know, what else to say to really expand upon what happens here.
I appreciate, and it's good to hear, and I'm glad that the public gets to hear that, because I think sometimes we do spend too much time talking about the minutia and the budget, and we don't get to hear all of that stuff that we know is that we might know is going on, but I'm not sure everybody else knows is going on. So, and I appreciate that. However, I think all in all, I mean, at this point, I'm pretty much with Chris. I think it is not, I think our fund balances are too low to be sustainable. I think lowering them at all is not in the best interest. I think we will be sitting here next year exactly the same place as we are now. We will be exactly the same place. We're going to be wondering how much deeper we're going to dig into our reserves next year, because every year we promise this is the last year we're going to do it, and every year we do it again. And so if we, people talk about a business, if we were a business, we would not have reserves this low. Or our stock price would be in the toilet. So I really think that we should not be taking money out of reserve. If that means we have to pierce, we have to pierce, because we can't just keep emptying the piggy bank. At some point, it's not going to be there when we need it. And then 2 or 3 years down the road, the kids are going to be in real trouble because the stock market isn't doing all that well. At some point, pension contributions are going to start ticking back up again. The healthcare costs show no sign of abating. We have contracts that are coming up. We have a lot of pressures, and we're going to need reserves for it, and emptying our reserves now I do not think is fiscally prudent.
I started out when we started the process and had the community forum, and I was, from everything I heard at that point, in favor of piercing. And as I heard about the STAR program losing its grant, and we talked about the different permutations of how we could restore the STAR program, I was very much in favor of going for the most that we could do, because I had heard the STAR program was very successful, and I heard testimonies of some of the kids in the program, and they are, in my opinion, among the most underrepresented kids in the community. But I have to say that, I mean, that piece that I just said is still true about the children in the STAR program. But after the numbers have changed, and regardless of when we knew what, and you know, what, I mean, I know that some of the money was already in as of January, and some of us may not have known how much money was already being considered, and if we were getting more, funding from the state. You know, we weren't aware perhaps, but the bottom line is that after April 1st, we saw that there is a way, a very feasible way, to do almost everything that we were planning on doing with the previous plan, and making great strides in the district. And I don't think it matters that, you know, the bottom line is, are we going to be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish and not pierce the cap? And that's the preference, and I think that's the way we have, I think that's what we have to go, where we have to go. I think we have just been presented with a budget that is a really good budget, and you know, it's within the cap. Will we have to pierce it next year or the year after? Perhaps. I don't think that, in answer to what Larry said, I don't feel that taking $400,000 out of reserves is the same as what we've taken more money in the past. I don't, you know, this is quite a bit less than we've taken, and I can't say, you know, it's another 400, that's true, but we're actually going in the right direction if you want to look at it that way. And I'm not exactly clear, and I was a little confused, I just need some clarification, because if we do sell the land and we do get additional money that go into the reserves, well, we can't, they're restricted, but does that amount of money, while we still have some portion of whatever that number is, go towards restoring our status as a district that's not in distress? I mean, it still helps us in that regard. It's maybe not money we can dip into and use for something else, but it does speak to our financial.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's an important point, and I was very concerned about the STAR program when I first saw the new budget, because of all the things that were being maintained with this new budget that doesn't pierce the cap. The STAR program was the item that didn't initially appear on it, but I've since learned from Dr. Mooney, and we've talked about it amongst ourselves, that we are doing something different than the STAR program, but not, I mean, it seems to me that it will accomplish the homework clubs and working with the kids, and the combining the money that the district is going to have, and hopefully getting outside foundation money as well, that we will actually be able to put together a program that is unique to our population of ENLs, but will be a very potentially good, sound program that will accomplish the same thing, and that is to help these kids catch up to their peers and fulfill their potential. So I mean, that plan is still in the works, but I've been convinced that the administration and I know the board is very committed to that, because we all are very much committed to that population. So in summary, I am in favor of this budget. I don't think, given the fact that we did get, however it's spent and whatever's being done, the bottom line is we did get more state aid than we expected. It's a fairly large budget-to-budget percentage, and I don't think this is the year that we can pierce the cap, nor should we, because I think we're able to accomplish what we need to with the budget that's been presented. And I want to thank the administration for getting it together, you know, in the last couple of days, because I know it's a tremendous amount of work, and I want to thank all my fellow board members, because we've all been looking at this for a really long time, and thank the community that was at the budget meeting yesterday, and the presidents who were there representing the HSAs, giving us their feedback on what they think it would take to pierce the cap. Do we need to pierce the cap at this point? And coming to the conclusion, I believe, that we don't need to, and that we won't, you know, we don't need to, and then, you know, depending on what my fellow board members vote on, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you also to the administration. Mary, you circulated to us a property tax report card, and on that, on the bottom of the 15-16 column, the financial statement for 15-16 shows the reserves ending at $4,097,000, and that the estimated reserves at the end of 16-17, when we publish as of June of this year, will actually be $4,165,000. So that has already taken into account both the $400,000 that you've used in estimating this budget and the $450,000 which we believe we'll have left over of unspent funds from the 15-16 budget.
Correct.
Okay, and on the back side of the paper, it shows that at the moment it's 2.83, and actually as a percentage against the budget will increase to 2.84%. If you look at the trend over the last 3 years, we took $3.9 million out of our reserves to balance the budget 2 years ago. Last year we took $1 million. This year we're looking at $850,000, and of that, if you will, $450,000 of it is the money we theoretically would deposit into the reserves from unspent money from this year's budget, where in prior years we were taking much larger sums out. So the trend over the last 3 years is decreasing while still the reserve total is going up. Also, if you look at the last slide, Mary, where the very last category where you give the number $147.7 million, which is the piercing number, that takes into account already still using the $450,000 of board contribution, which without that would roughly be another 0.25 and would push the actual Pierce total, if we were not going to touch any of the reserves, to something in the neighborhood of 2.18% as the actual cap number.
Yes.
Okay. So just to the point, I know we're throwing around $850,000 or $400,000, but the $450,000 to me is in a lot of ways, we've got that money coming out of this year's budget as unspent funds, so I really believe the discussion goes around the $400,000. And to Karen's earlier statement about the risk to the budget or not and the 60% vote, I think there are a lot of factors that go into that. I'm going to leave aside, if you will, the educational stuff. Everybody's covered that, and I don't need to reiterate the number of positions, the sections. I think Dr. Mooney did a great job articulating that. Historically, when you look at our votes, we have not succeeded as a community to rally sufficient votes in any of the recent elections when we have a contentious proposition on the ballot. When we've had budgets that are within the tax cap, they are slam dunk. The no side, if you will, of the community and the leaders of that agenda have very little fodder at that point to come out, because we're looking at budgets that are remaining within the cap, and there's not a lot of room to go there. When we've had contentious two-sided elections, we come nowhere close to having a 60% majority. If you use the bond as an example, where there was a lot of angst on both sides, the actual majority position there was 3 or 4% north of 50. And I think it is if you will, a misconception, at least in my opinion, that even during that one where we had a lot of rallying support within the community on the yes side, we did not push the yes vote from, let's imagine, the 2,200 level where we were to what would have been required, which would have been 3,000 in order to carry the day against 2,000 no votes. And the 60% hurdle is a really onerous point in time, that when you look at who comes out and votes yes now, and you look at the historical elections, we have to go find 600, 700, or 800 more yes votes to overcome that no vote. If we were to win, great. I would love nothing more. I believe that sooner or later, within the next 3 or 4 years, we will need to pierce the cap. We had a lot of great tailwind this year with, again, the pension fund down 1.6. Unfortunately, medical was up 1.6 million, and we're not going to necessarily be able to count on that every year. If enrollment continues to trend up sooner or later, with all due respect to the no side, they're going to have to realize you just can't keep stuffing more kids in the buildings and not have more money to educate them. But we're doing most of what we need to do here, and I just don't believe we are sitting at a point in time, given that we're going to raise year over year, and you can look at the last 5 years of state aid, and whether we knew about it in January or at the end on April 1st, we have not had an increase of $1.2 million in state aid over the last 4 or 5 years. And you combine that with the contributions that we're looking at of 450 and 400, that gets you to over 2. The new tax levy money that we will get us another 1-point-something million. We are increasing funding year over year by nearly $3 million into the school district. And while I'd love to have another 1% more and another 1.2 million, I don't believe that this is the realistic time to do it, because we're going to come back again and ask for it maybe next year or the year after if our enrollment jumps by another 100 kids. There is a tipping point. I just don't know that this year is that tipping point. So I'm in favor of the way the budget was presented tonight. Thank you.
I completely agree with Alan's point. I do not believe that for the sake of $400,000, it's really responsible of us to look to override the tax cap. I appreciate and felt that I could not support a budget without without most of the positions that had been presented, and since the administration has very carefully gone through the budget and found a way to present a budget that is within the levy limit and does preserve class size and the other issues that we all thought were important, I am absolutely in favor of this. So I thank you all for all the insane work that you've done for the last 36 hours, and I'm very comfortable with what you've presented tonight.
I wanted to add that Alan is a numbers person, and thank goodness he is, because he explains a lot of things to a lot of us in a way that is easy to understand. I'm more of a people person, and I have been out in the community, and I think it's our responsibility as board members to be out in the community and hear what people are saying. And what people are saying is that they do not want to pierce the tax cap if we can do what we're suggesting this evening and just take $400,000 out of the reserves as opposed to the millions we've been taking out, and not risk piercing the cap this year when we will, in fact, have to do it in years going forward. As Alan has said, the enrollment is not going anywhere but up, and we're going to have to go back to the community, and we can't keep doing that. So if we can do that this year, I think it's our responsibility to be respectful of our taxpayers. That's part of our job. And while some of us might feel that we'd be willing to pierce the cap and we'd be willing to pay more, we have to listen to the community. We serve a role here. We were elected to do that. And I think that the majority of the community has spoken to us, and this is something that they support wholeheartedly, and I think we have to listen to that. And with all respect to my colleagues that do not feel they can support this, I think it sounds like at this time we have a majority of the board that would like to support it. So I would ask if you think there's any further information you need that would change your mind, or if you feel you need more time, or if we should go ahead and take the vote this evening.
Well, as you said, the community has spoken. This has only been out for 24 hours. So the community that I had spoken to prior to was in support of overriding the tax cap, and I have not actually spoken to that many people to overwhelmingly convince me this is the right move. So if you would like to postpone the vote until the next meeting, I might change my mind, but at this point, if you want to stay, I can't.
Again, I'm sort of where Chris is. I think there's still unanswered questions for me. I'm still not quite sure how we take $850,000 out of reserves and end up with a higher number. I'd sort of like to see that math. I also, we talk about this $450,000 rollover money like it's cast in stone. I'd like to see the numbers that prove that we're really going to have that, and it's not going to end up being 445 or 440. I'd rather see it be 650. Again, there's an awful lot of assumptions that we're making that I have not seen backup for, that I don't, that are to me sort of a hope, and I'm not sure that that we want to be there. And I think that we need to be, I think one of the other things is, if we pierce now, we have a higher base, which means every other year from now becomes easier, instead of every other year from now becoming harder. Our levy limit is likely to remain where it is because, according to the powers that be, inflation is still low, so we're still likely to get a 0.8 next year. It's not going back up. So we're going to be in the same boat, and I don't see why. I don't see a reason to put off the inevitable. So, again, if we have some time and you can show me some information that makes me more comfortable with this, then I might change my mind. But at this point, I would think that I do not support it, so I would ask that we put it off.
Could I just jump in relative to estimates? We do have a quarter of the year left. We have gone through the major areas of the budget, including salaries, pensions, health insurance. You have a 59-page document in front of you. Much of what we do when we provide these estimates is looking back at historic documentation. I don't know how much more I really can provide to you other than to say we watch the appropriation status report on a daily basis as it gets down towards the last portion of the year. We have expenses that are unanticipated sometimes, but everyone knows that we certainly are not going to overspend the budget, and that we have a target number that we must reach. So we're watching it. But I don't know what evidence I can provide to you, because if I even gave you an appropriation status report, because the ERS payment has not yet been made, it's going to show $7 million is available, but it's truly not, because it has to be set aside.
No, I understand, and one of the things you said is we have a 59-page document that I've had in my hand for an hour and 25 minutes, at which time I've been tied up in a meeting and haven't been able to look at it. So again, that's not really giving us ample opportunity to look through this stuff and see if there are questions. And I don't blame you for it, but that's the reality. I did not have this a week in advance.
Yes, but the areas that have been reduced, I can specify every single line to you. It's equipment, furniture, textbooks, salary codes have been adjusted, outdoor education has been adjusted. There was a a piece of equipment in the transportation department that was removed.
That is what they're talking about. I think they want more time to review the document overall, not just know those specific codes.
And just like, I mean, using textbooks as an example, we've put off textbooks for many, many years, and I thought earlier this year we had a discussion that we really have to start getting textbooks again, and now we're cutting them back.
No, we do. Excuse me. The building codes have not been cut. In fact, you will see that Weber has a significant increase in their textbook code, and we did not touch that. The textbook code where we took money from was Dr. Westervelt's, which is a supplemental textbook code, but the building codes pretty much remained intact. And again, you will see, excuse my voice, Weber in particular had not, you're correct, they had not had textbook monies allocated for way too many years, so we're addressing that in this budget.
Do any of the other board members have any objection to tabling the vote for the budget until April 19th?
Other than wanting to get it done so that we know the direction we're heading, are there any logistic problems with holding off until the 19th?
The county no longer has lever machines. We're using the new scannable machines. We have been told that we have to give the documentation to them no later than a month before. Our next meeting is the 19th. Our vote is on May 17th. So my concern is, number one, we have to provide this information to the county. They create a template for us that then goes to a vendor. There are 2 vendors in the state of New York who are doing all of the Nassau County districts ballots. We've never done it before. I just want to make sure we have ballots in time for the vote. And the budget brochure itself, which, yeah, well, and we're out of the office the week after, but I guess whatever has to be done from Wednesday to Friday will get done.
Well, I mean, my only conclusion is I think we end up almost in the same spot. And let's imagine that we were going to vote on the other resolution to pierce the cap. I don't know that the 2-week difference changes that perspective of piercing or not piercing. I mean, if the vote were, if it's going to be 4-2 one way, I think it would be 4-2 the other way. So I don't know that we have much of an advantage. I understand looking at it, but as Mary started to articulate, we had this exact packet. Probably 85 or 90% of the line items are identical, and that there are only the ones that Mary was commenting on that have been changed. And if it means sitting here for another hour, and I apologize to the community who would then have to sit here, if we need to literally go page by page just so that we can go down it and save the 2 weeks, I would prefer to sit here for an hour and do it and be done with it, and go look at each one of those codes, and if we need to talk about them, rather than propose that that's what we may sit here and do for 2 or 3 hours on the 19th. Because if there are line items in here that we need to debate, then let's debate them. And because the totals aren't going to change that much, unless we're somehow going to magically come in the middle and suddenly propose instead of 1.9%, well, maybe we should pierce at 1.4%, and can we rattle around some other thing? I don't know. I don't know where that total comes from. I'm sure we could magically make it up, but at the moment, I don't see the advantage of losing the time. If we need to go through this, let's go through it.
Is that the kind of time that you think you need? Yeah, the impression I got was that they wanted to talk to people in the community, but I don't want to speak for my colleagues. The one question I have, which might be like a stupid question, but is there any, I hear how waiting until the 19th really pushes us into a difficult timing situation. Is there any way to do a meeting next week, or is that ridiculous? Like to have, I mean, I don't know how long, we could do a vote now, and we pretty much know what the vote's gonna be, so it's gonna pass, but if we had made a meeting next week, would that satisfy people? I mean, just so that we were all on the same page, not that we have to be, but so that everybody has a chance.
Well, I've heard that we needed more information on the budget and the community comments. The community is here. The comments this evening going to be the help that you need, the direction you need to hear from the community, or is that not what you had in mind?
I know that we're going to hear threats about people voting no because we're overriding and, stuff like that. I would prefer not to hear that type of comment. I know that the people that are here were in a meeting yesterday, so I'm not quite sure that they're necessarily going to articulate everybody unless they have gotten feedback from the HSAs and PTAs. If they have, then that very well could help me. But this is different even from yesterday. So we can't even, there's been no opportunity to hear it more.
The differences since yesterday are based on the input on the meetings we've had from those community members and changes they wanted to see if we could make in the budget. They were exactly things that were asked for by those people. So I think that would speak to the fact that they would support this budget. They pretty much unanimously supported the idea that they do not want to pierce the tax cap. But if you would like to hear from them, I don't know. I mean, I was willing to wait the 2 weeks, but if it doesn't sound like the information with Larry is going to change drastically, if you want to hear from the community, we can certainly go to community comments right now. Okay? So we will go to community comments right now, and we will ask again for the 3-minute limit and that you identify yourself, and we'll continue the discussion after.
I simply wanted to add, in speaking to some of the principals relative to these cuts to their building level codes, I was totally assured that staffing was far more important and that people would make do with whatever supplies, monies they had lost to make up those differences.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Mannion, the co-president of Parents Council. I just want to say, I think currently perception is reality, so the general public that we've talked to thinks we've gotten a lot of aid based on what they've read, and they're not getting the real detail out of it. So based on that, I don't know how eager a lot of those people are to pierce. The fact that you can still keep us, that you found a way to get all the new sections that we need and stay under the tax cap is huge. My biggest concern is, as far as waiting to vote on this, if we have to get people to pierce the cap, which we're going to have to do, and we are behind you 100% in doing it, but I fear the lead time we will need to gather a 60% majority vote, we're going to need more time. The 19th, those 3 weeks, I don't think will be enough. We're going to have to really educate everybody on what that is, and that would be my biggest concern moving forward. But we are ready for that. We know that's coming, and we fully support that. But we do appreciate the budget that's been put forth within the tax cap and appreciate everything that you were able to keep in there. Thank you.
In Steinberg, I'm also co-president of the Port Washington Parents Council. I'm also a parent of a student at Schreiber and a local taxpayer. I want to say that I know a lot of work has gone into this. We know that the tax cap is going to have to be overridden next year maybe, or the year after, or very soon, and we are very interested in doing that because we want the best education and a quality education for our children. However, as Jennifer just mentioned, with the increased state aid and the perception that it's a lot of money, and we know it's not as much as has been in the press, I want to say that at this point, I wholeheartedly support the proposed school budget for the next year. I think it's time we all come together for our children's future. After months of discussion and careful consideration of the needs of the students and the community, I think the Board of Education has proposed a responsible budget. It stays within the tax cap and it delivers high-quality education for our children. Now, while many people in New York State call it the 2% tax cap, the Board of Education and the administration have had to struggle to meet a tax cap set by law at an astoundingly low 0.8% for the next school year. This was an incredible task, especially because of growing enrollment in the district. At this point, we hope you decide on the budget tonight. We would like to rally all parents behind the budget. There's still a lot of work to get the proposed budget passed. If you wait, as Jennifer said, for another few weeks, we certainly, it will be much, much more difficult. So I support this budget, and Jennifer and I both pledge that we'll work with all parents to get it passed on May 17th. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Cindy Maroney. I'm one of the co-presidents of Guggenheim HSA.
Hi, and I'm Lisa Sprita, the other co-president.
Yesterday, we were the ones who did not support the budget as presented. We appreciate the administration and the board members going back and working it out because Guggenheim is only getting one additional section, even though we have a lot of oversized classes. So we appreciate all the support that you're giving Guggenheim in this new budget. And so given the changes that were made last night, we will support this new budget. However, if the board decides to go back and pierce the cap, we will support that too.
Yeah, everything that Cindy says, I agree with. We first were disappointed, but we do know due to space constraints that have more than one additional classroom, so we really appreciate else you could shift money around and to help, all of it. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Meredith Steigman and Mara Silverstein. We're co-presidents of the Schreiber HSA. We appreciate all the hard work the board has done, and we feel with what you have come back with, we're very content with the numbers and this budget that you're putting forth, and we will, and our voters would absolutely support it, knowing that down the road, and it may be next year, that piercing the cap may have to be discussed again. But for this year, we're very comfortable with it. With not piercing the cap, with your budget. Let's make that clear. With the budget you're putting forth. Thank you.
No, and I just said we appreciate how hard, we've met many times, to Chris's point, in meetings and discussions, and we have had lots of opportunity and worked hard to reach out to as many people as possible to have everybody understand where we are and what all of you have done, spending the time to really crunch numbers and get as much as we possibly could in the very little money that we.
Hi, Melissa Vasicchio, Weber HSA co-president.
And Julie Chassell, Weber co-president.
As parents of school-aged children and Weber HSA co-presidents, we would like to thank the board, Dr. Mooney, and the administration for all their hard work in coming up with a proposed school budget that stays within the tax cap and still provides quality education for our children. We support this budget and are dedicated to working to get this budget passed on May 17th. Thanks.
And I also just wanted to say, too, that, we all know how often you checked with us and said, what is your community saying, you know, what are you hearing out there? And I just think everybody should know that you guys were very, you know, adamant about saying, we want to listen to what you guys are hearing. So I just want the community to know that and appreciate the fact that that was very much taken into consideration in presenting the budget that we will support. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michelle Duran. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Manor Haven PTA.
And I'm Erica Trapp, the other co-president of the Manor Haven PTA.
And we'd also like to thank the board and the administration for all the work you've done, especially since Friday, on figuring out how to best approach the budget this year. I think we all were pleasantly surprised by extra state aid, and the chance that it gives us to stay within the tax cap levy limit, I think, is really wonderful, because it'll be a lot easier for us to go out and get our parents to vote in favor of the budget. And I think it'd be a real uphill battle this year to try to pierce. I know it's coming, and when we do have to pierce, I will be out there doing everything I can to get the voters out, but I just don't think now is the right time.
I'm going to agree with Michelle on that. As you know, Manor Haven is one of the schools with the biggest overcrowding problem and the growing enrollment. And we appreciate that everything the administration and the board has done to get us what we need. And we do understand that it's going to come, and we're going to have to pierce the cap eventually, and we'll support that. But we do support this budget this year, and we know that our school does as well.
Hi, I'm Pam Ohlendorf. I'm a co-president for SUSA's HSA.
I'm Bonnie Sinclair, co-president of the HSA at SUSA.
And we also want to echo what our colleagues had said, that we appreciate all the hard work that Mary Callahan and Dr. Mooney have been doing with all the numbers recently, and that we also appreciate that you held a forum that you could get the community response earlier this year. I know the parents at SUSA were responsive to us when we asked them how they felt, and as much as they do want to support the education, I think that everyone agreed that piercing the cap is a drastic step, and for able to get so much in the budget at the within the tax cap, I don't think that this is the time. Bonnie and I both feel that this isn't the time to try to pierce it. Maybe when situation's more dire, it would be a better situation and easier to get the votes out that would be needed to do so. Thanks.
Hi, Liz Greilsheimer, Salem HSA.
Kathy Galanis, Salem HSA.
First and foremost, we want to thank you for all your hard work, your tireless hours going over the budget, trying to ensure equitable education for all the students here in Port Washington. At this point, Kathy and I are very pleased with the budget you put forth and are happy to support your budget and tell you that we are dedicated to help pass this budget on May 17th. So thank you.
Jamie Lowy, co-president of the Daily HSA.
And Deb Dano, co-president Daily HSA. We're here to tell you that we support this proposed budget. We are happy to stand behind it. We are so grateful for all of your hard work. We understand the increase in aid. We understand what is going to be going on with taking the $400,000 out. We feel that this is not the year to try to pierce the cap, and we support this and appreciate all of your work. Thank you so much.
Dave Sattinger. First, I want to thank you tremendously for your hard work. I think this is the type of budget that really reflects the entire community and where they're at, and it's very appreciative. I do want to say that I agree with Larry that we're going to find ourselves here next year, and I think it's just incumbent upon us to really finally get to the point where we can have some real collective bargaining to put us in a systemic position where we can be effective in the future and hopefully not be there. I would hope that we never have to pierce the cap. It may be a reality. If it comes to that, that's what we'll have to do. but I would really like us to see us get in a position where we have a long-term sustainable plan in place where we're not in this situation every year. Finally, I'm a little uncomfortable with the concept of feeling like people are threatened because they may vote no. That's what democracy is about. I think you've seen it at work here in coming to this budget, and I want to thank everybody for their participation in this process. Thank you.
My name's Ron Rochester. I just had a couple questions. I would love to support the budget, but I think if I'm going to go out and tell people in my community to support it, there were some questions regarding. I'm a CPA, so I understand numbers. But one of the things that got me is in reference to the sale of the property. And I understand it has to be segregated if you're selling it as far as a reserve, but it wasn't explained what you could do with that money at all. Does it all have to go to the community, or can it be used for the school in any fashion? And I think that's a question that will come up, and I can't answer that, so that's why I'm asking you that.
It has to be used to lower the tax levy in future years.
All of it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can't use it at all in reference to doing anything for the school itself or educationally, just reducing the tax levy?
Yes.
Okay.
But in effect, by doing that,
it reduces.
It frees up other money to be used for classrooms.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just have to be able to explain that to anybody else that asks that question. All right, so I think that's really where we're going to go to. I agree that I think that eventually we may have to pierce the gap, but I agree that this is probably not the year. I mean, the community is going to look at the fact that, we've got more money from the state. They're going to say, why are we going to pierce it now? And maybe in the future, I think we would have to, but I would say that you would have a stronger position not to do that at this time.
If there are no other community comments at this point, we will move on. And I think at this time it would be the best thing to just call this to question. So I'm going to pull that out, Mary. And I guess that would be item A3. Am I right? Nope.
4.
A4.
Right.
And will you read the amount for me?
Certainly. Resolved that the Board of Education adopts the proposed budget for the 2016-17 school year in the amount of $146,639,452. Did I say that wrong? I did. $146,639,452. I did the same thing last year, I remember.
I'll call that to question. Do I have a second? Ms. Johnson, all in favor? Oh, we'll open for discussion first.
I heard all the community comments, and I think we have I think for again, what is a $246,000 increase in state aid, we're taking a big hit. I understand the community. I understand that based upon that, it probably will not pass. I'm still very uncomfortable with it. However, as a board member, once a fourth person raises their hand, I am 100% behind the board when they do that, because that is the way democracy works, and that is the way a system works. So I will be supporting the budget in the voting booth, assuming that it passes here tonight. So I just want that said. I think that we are not making the best decision. I think optics is everything, and we've probably already blown the optics. And I think that that's part of. I think that's our responsibility as a board. I don't think we presented our. I don't think we presented this well from day one, And I think we have sort of put ourselves into a position where we can't actually do what's best for the students or best for the community.
Thank you. Do you want to do A5 now, Mary? Or we'll do it after?
No, but there is a notation in the minutes as to who the dissenting voters are on the board. And
okay.
you can really do that, if you're doing the
Part of
rest
it,
as a group,
okay.
it can
All
be
right, so
included there.
First, we'll go back to the committee reports. I just actually want to make a comment about the budget. With all respect, Larry, I think that we have come out in front of this at the very beginning, trying to tell the community step by step everything that was unfolding as it was unfolding and getting a lot of input from the community. I'm really proud of the communication that we've had, so I do not agree with you on that. I think the community has had ample opportunity to give us their input, and we have listened, and I think that that's our job. So now we'll move on to the committee reports and budget and facilities. I don't think if we have anything else to update at this time. Policy and personnel.
We had to unfortunately cancel our last policy and personnel meeting due to my ongoing now over, but I had a bad bout with winter illness. And we are back on for April 22nd, which is Earth Day. And on the agenda, we will have a continued discussion of our facilities usage policy, as well as an update on the website. The agenda will be posted. There might be a couple of other items, so look for the agenda. Thank you. Sorry? 8:30.
Curriculum?
Curriculum, we met on March 31st, and we had a review of the technology programs at Schreiber High School, and they were quite impressive and quite far-ranging, and there's a lot happening there that, again, is stuff that I don't know a lot of people know. One of the things that I found really exciting is that our auto shop came in and placed second in the state auto shop champions. I don't know what an auto shop championship is. Maybe it's like the pit stop at Indy or something. But anyway, it's great because all the other schools in it were schools much more dedicated toward, we were like the only comprehensive high school in that mix. Most of the others were schools that were much more hands-on. So that's a real testament not only to our students, but to the program. And just every time we looked at it, wood shop, just all of these things that we sort of take for granted are really, there's really so much richness to them and so much depth to them that really are helping the kids, and that the kids are finding motivation in and enjoyment in, and a lot of them were putting their senior project into those areas. And it was a great report, and hopefully we can get the PowerPoint on the website if it's not already there. And I think it'd behoove people to take a look at it because it's really exciting stuff. And that's one of the places where you can actually hear some of the great stuff that's going on that doesn't get the filter up here. And I know the meetings are sort of hard to get to because they're in the morning, but that's where a lot of the real stuff that a lot of the positive stuff that we're doing gets discussed. And it'd be nice if we could move more of it up here, but I know we have a lot to do. Our next meeting is the 21st. Thank you. And what is our agenda item?
We will be talking about instructional technology.
Thank you.
I'll now move my items A1 through D10, pulling A4 because we've already voted on it. Do I have a second? Ms. Johnson, all in favor? 6-0, thank you. I would like to make special thanks for their generous donations. The Stop and Shop Scholarship Fund, the Schreiber HSA, the Ed Foundation, and Anton Schroeder? Schroeder. Thank you very much for your donations to the school district. And I will now go to the board policy for adoption. On the recommendation of the superintendent, policy 5020, equal educational opportunities, and policy 9010, equal employment opportunity. Do I have a second? Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor? 6-0, thank you. Do we have any old business? New business? Any other community comments at this time? No, thank you. Okay, we are adjourned.